Yeah, grand. Welcome everybody to the fourth instalment of the Hockey at Home series, sponsored by Jaffa. And tonight we have the wonderful Matt Alexander with us, who is one of the playing members of Hockey for Heroes and Strength and Conditioning Extraordinaire. And we are here to chat all about the huge volumes of sport that our juniors are involved in at all levels, from when they probably start doing PE and things like that at school when they're 4 or 5 years old, all the way through to senior hockey at 18 years old. They're involved in so many different spaces and pushed and pulled in all different directions. So that is something that we felt was quite an interesting topic on how we can manage those things. And Matt's going to be joining us tonight to kind of give his strength and conditioning perspective on it, and also how we can try and manage injuries within this time as well, because obviously our youngsters are growing at that time as well. So get your questions in on the comment box. Joel is here to play Michael Parkinson again. So please leave any questions or comments that you've got, and he'll fire them at us as the evening goes through. So I thought we'd just start with a little bit of information about this and something that I've experienced in my kind of coaching environment. So just to give you a bit of background, I'm a PE teacher, head of hockey at school, independent school, performance centre coach. I've been a county coach and a club coach. So, and I've done all of that in the same season as well. So I was seeing loads and loads of different kids of different ages who were playing as much hockey as what I was coaching. So in the clubs, in the counties, some of them were doing performance centre as well, and at their schools, which means that they're probably doing between 4 or 5 hockey sessions a week, plus their standard PE lessons, plus then Saturday fixtures, Sunday training sessions, or Sunday junior fixtures. That's just hockey alone. Some of them then have a second sport or a third sport, or get roped in for playing netball or tennis or cricket or whatever it might be at their school. So Matt, do you have any thoughts on that to begin with?
Yeah, so similar sort of experiences as you. So I did some strength and conditioning coaching for Surrey Cricket, the developmental stages at Surrey Cricket, some GB rowers, and some school stuff as well. So I've also seen kind of like the pathway from junior all the way up. But like, as you said there, like kids are just getting pulled left, right, and center, and they want to be playing sport. They want to be doing it as much as they can. But a lot of feedback that I got from parents and stuff like that is more around the lines of, is it too much? Like, are they doing enough? Like, what's this going to lead to? And then from my point of view, like I had them in the gym doing various different stuff, either weighted, unweighted. That then opened up the questions then towards kind of injuries. Like, should they be lifting weights at that age? Should they be doing like that amount of a volume of exercise at that age, and like how it affects their growth and everything around there. And I just think, I don't know what you think, but like there's either a lot of misinformation out there, or there's not enough information out there, or like enough solid guidelines, I think, for the athletes themselves, the coaches, and kind of like at club level with kind of like how you manage that as a whole. And I think organizationally, I think that's probably the biggest problem that we've got of how all those kind of blend together, and how the school or the club progresses forwards in terms of getting the most out of an athlete, but like, how do we then also look after the athlete and they get the most out of the sport that they want to, in terms of achievement, but also enjoyment. And then on top of that, then you've then got to police parents that are paying fees, or at schools and clubs and stuff like that. So it's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Yeah, it's such a like multi-faceted approach to managing an individual, and it kind of makes me think that I completely agree with you in the sense that we don't have enough information about these things. When I did my teaching qualification, there was no like, oh, we want kids need to be monitoring their loading at this age and then progressing to this at this age and then progressing to that at that age. I was fortunate that I did a strength and conditioning module at uni, but that was very adult based, not junior based. And then it's not at all really touched on in kind of my formal hockey coaching qualifications there. So it's only through reading and research and talking to people such as yourselves that you can kind of get that knowledge. So I think that that's a really interesting point that you've made there, is that we actually don't have the tools as teachers and coaches at the moment anyway, I feel, in order to correctly manage these individuals in all the different spaces.
Is that because the different, so irrelevant of so in teaching, the teaching profession, in rugby, the RFU, in football, the FA, in hockey, the England hockey, are we saying that these governing bodies aren't releasing better information, or are we saying maybe the information has gone out to a club or to on a certain document somewhere that's stored somewhere and it's not widely shared, or there literally isn't actually that information available and you've got to kind of create it yourself?
I don't think there's that information available. I've never come across it.
So from my side of things, like there's definitely information out there on like how to appropriately load athletes, like how many hours they should be doing and all of those numbers. But I think we're right on the cusp of clubs and schools and stuff like that actually realizing the benefits of strength and conditioning and actually putting a little bit more focus towards it and how they manage these kids and these potential like elite athletes. I think that we're trying to kind of now bring what's worked really well in the adult world and the elite world and trickle it down, but there's just a bit of a gap, right? There's for me, I think at the moment they're looking at strength and conditioning and kind of like recovery strategies and stuff like that as like a nice to have or like an add-on, instead of it being compulsory. That we're not only because we need to look after the Colts and stuff like their joints, their growth and all that sort of stuff, but also from like an education point of view, when they do get into academies and stuff like that and they get exposure to strength and conditioning and stuff like that, and they've got some sort of foundation of fundamental movements and stuff like that, it's I personally think that it's all part of that coaching process. You've got to give that junior athlete like all of the tools. You've got to technically, like psychologically, and then you've then got to give them the tools and stuff like around recovery, injury prevention, like how do they get strong, like, and all that sort of stuff. And I think at the moment you're seeing a little bit more of it, especially through kind of like private schools and stuff like that maybe have a little bit more money to employ like internal or external S&C coaches.
That kind of leads on to the first question that's just been thrown in, Pinhead, is from Nikki Dowds. At what age would you ideally introduce S&C into a junior training schedule?
So it's a great question. As soon as they're ready, I think there's this preconception around strength and conditioning that it's, weights and stuff like that. Basically all you're trying to do is you're trying to create fundamental movement patterns. So as soon as that person's coachable, then you should be implementing technical stuff, right? So you go to a junior training session and you take them through a warm-up or whatever. That's basically strength and conditioning, like right at the base level.
That's a good point, because I think the preconceived view of it is that strength and conditioning is lugging a load of weights around the gym and getting beefed up. But actually, I mean, could you educate everyone on what strength and conditioning actually is then?
So for me, strength and conditioning is making someone robust enough to complete the task that's given to them. Right. So whatever that looks like. So the robustness element of it kind of covers the injury prevention side of strength and conditioning, and then the ability then to kind of complete the task of them being able to perform their sport at the highest level that they're like physically and their talent will allow them to. So you take that all the way down to to a 5-year-old turning up to Sunday morning training. Like that looks very different to a 21-year-old, but the emphasis should still be the same, right? For the 5-year-olds, like if you're taking that session, you're still gonna increase their heart rate to increase blood flow to help mobilize joints and increase like their ability to engage in the session. You're creating games and stuff like that if it's a 3-on-2, then it's going to be more intense cardiovascular for the 2 players rather than the 3. And they're all kind of bits that kind of get overlooked because it's not kind of necessarily labeled as strength and conditioning. Like
and sorry, Steph, do you do any of this at your school, at performance centers or county?
Yeah. Stuff? Yeah. So, I mean, just speaking from a younger level, we have gymnastics that's on a curriculum from reception. You know, so from when they're 4 or 5 years old, and you know, gymnastics is to you and I is like the stuff that you see on the Olympics. You know, where they're like using the rings and the beam and whatever else. But actually, at a very young level, it's just a case of getting them moving and getting them aware and increasing their proprioception, so increasing the awareness of their body and what they're doing, and that in a very basic format, I guess, you know, as Matt said, is a version of strength and conditioning, and because we're trying to develop those movement patterns so that they can coordinate both their arms, both their legs, and transfer body weight from one position to another safely and efficiently, where they remain balanced, you know, and all of those kind of things.
So back to Dawn's question then, in relation to what age should they start doing S&C? Am I right in surmising there that a version of S&C, strength and conditioning, should start ASAP, and that could be down to the basic form of certain movements, as opposed to
like absolutely
Sale rugby club, you know, like 19 stone meatheads chucking around ridiculous amounts of weight. So there's different variants of it, and it's making it relevant and proportionate to that child in that moment.
Yeah,
I think
something that's really important to consider there is, like, whilst we're labeling it as strength and conditioning, which makes it sound very serious and very formal and in a gym and you know, all of that kind of stuff that we associate with it as adults, I think it's important to remember that we need to adapt and make these things relevant to the age groups that we're working with. So as we say, you know, we do gymnastics, but actually a lot of that is playing like different shaped games where they're playing, moving around a room and got to get themselves into a body shape or of some sort. You know, it's making it relevant to the age group that they're at. So
and I guess as they start developing, Pinhead, would you agree that, I keep calling you Pinhead. Sorry, mate. Would you agree that it's more along the lines of keeping it relative to the sport as well? So if you're going to a performance center, your strength and conditioning would be relative to that sport, as opposed to, I mean, if you had a professional weightlifter, would you have him on the same strength and conditioning program as a professional hockey player?
So that would depend on what age they're at, right?
Okay, so they're both professionals.
So it'd be they would look very different. So it's the same as kind of as if you're taking someone through technical training of a sport. Like, you're going to start it off with it being very, very fun and stuff like that at the beginning, and then as you then start getting into teams and stuff like that, stuff gets a little bit more structured around tactics and stuff like that. It would happen exactly the same in S&C. Like, you'd start to bring in maybe some external load, barbells and stuff like that, and then move up. So if you've got a weightlifter, then you're going to be kind of hitting home those movement patterns of clean and jerk, snatch, and kind of being really specific to that. And then, you know, then with other sports, you're going to really dial it into what that looks like for them as well.
Yeah. So to those that don't know in the audience and watching this video, is that Matt's wife, Nikki Lloyd, is a retired international hockey player, played for Scotland, number of caps, over 200 caps, I think it was. So did you learn anything from an adaptive perspective through Nikki's process and experience that you would give? So say your top 2 tips for anyone out there in hockey. What is your top 2 things that you could learn from Nikki that you've seen Nikki go through that worked really well?
In terms of strength and conditioning,
yeah.
Top 2 tips. I would say foam roll and focus on that recovery. That was always a bit of a focus. I remember the last flight we had, we got cups. So the Chinese kind of medicine where it sucks the air out and it kind of like pulls the fascia apart to recover. So we just sit in front of the TV and should be cupping our legs and stuff like that to increase recovery. And then
so SEC can be used for recovery.
Yeah, for that. And then in terms of that, like also like recovery and nutrition, I would say we had some big discussions on kind of her needs in terms of nutrition. There was like some stuff being sent down from Scottish hockey, and I was kind of bouncing back with some of the stuff that I was doing, and there was just a bit of a clash, and we had to play about with it, and just tweaking her nutrition actually kind of release a little bit of extra performance and recovery and stuff like that from her.
So there's been a really interesting point here made by Kate Mason. It's difficult to work out what kids should be doing as parents to support their sessions. Loads going on in sport during the week with school, club, JPC, RPC, all the different PCs, etc. Just a quick warm up and quick cool down. How do you support this at home to create real strength, and how do you prevent injury from doing too much? I think that really is the crux of why we're here tonight. We've been approached by a number
it's a really good question
on the sheer volume. So can we answer that question from Kate, and then can we jump into the volume and how, as a parent and a coach, we can help the kids, the Colts, not the Colts, the juniors, as it's been pointed out, to manage this process?
So I think I think it's going to be a very similar story tonight, and it's going to all be about recovery, right? Like that's probably the thing that's most within your control, of being able to, if your kids, you know, getting into loads of different sports and playing like all the RPCs and stuff like that, and enjoying it and doing well, then the only thing that you can really control and help support is probably the nutrition and the recovery side of it. They probably don't have enough time within their schedule to throw in a strength and conditioning session of kind of like core work or, you know, glute work or stuff like that to prevent injury. But like if you can manage the total stress that's being put on their body during that week, then that will then help them, well, one, perform better, but help to prevent injuries.
Steph, anything from you?
Yeah, I think as Matt said, you know, recovery is obviously a massive thing. I think that's definitely something that you can help support in terms of keeping your coaches and your teachers informed about everything that's going on within their week. You know, as I said earlier, I've been on kind of the coaches side of things and the teacher side of things, of where, oh no, so and so can't play at the weekend because they've got this on Sunday, or so and so's done this, that, and the other in the week, and they're feeling really tired, so they, you know, probably won't be able to get as many minutes in at the weekend, or whatever it might be. So that kind of stuff is it is manageable, providing that you've been able to give the information to coaches and to your teachers early on with that. The other thing is that you can speak to them about and saying, look, so and so's had this on, so and so's got that on in the future. Is it okay if they have a kind of less intense role within the session, or can they limit the amount of minutes that they've got in the game at the weekend, or whatever it might be? You know, there's solutions to everything, providing that the knowledge has been given to the coaches and the teachers in those.
That's quite an interesting stance at the same hand, though, because I guess coming from, I'm not done any coaching for PC or any of those platforms, but I guess are the coaches, and I guess that's more the question, are the coaches from the different levels of where the kids are playing, or the juniors are playing, are the coaches at the different levels communicating? And if they are, then as they start working their way up, because I mean, before we started this call, we started talking about the different elements of where certain students can be playing. You can be playing your school hockey, your club hockey, your county hockey, your PC. There's dice, there's nags, there's all the different elements of
so many acronyms.
Jigsaw. Yeah, I have no idea what half of them mean. But on the same hand, should there be, and I wonder, could there be some kind of communication?
Yeah, I really think that this is an area that needs to be addressed within coaching, and definitely within the pathway, like the England or the player pathway, the England hockey stuff that's going on, because there's a kind of, because they're managed by regions as well, so different regions work in different ways, and the amount of information that gets moved from a county to a region to then that goes up to kind of the national age groups, I don't know, I don't have the answers to how much of that information gets moved across. You kind of, as a coach, your security blanket of information, or your go-to place for information, is the player and their family, or the people that they've got at home. That's kind of your go-to point. The challenge is because, especially in that kind of performance pathway place, is that kids feel pressured because they want to do well in those spaces. You know, they want to get to Futures Cup, they want to get into the Performance Centre, or they want to get into England. So they will feel the need to go all out every session, you know, and it's like there has to, and it's something that's changing, and as Performance Centre is kind of growing, and coaches are getting more and more aware of how demanding the hockey playing time of those players is, outside of just a Performance Centre setting. So yeah, no, there isn't a place at the moment where you can get all that information. It is down to the player and whoever's at home they're managing their time, to kind of provide that information to us.
And then I guess from a parent's perspective, I think it's really healthy to, I mean, you're a coach, not me, would you encourage that person to feel confident enough to come and approach you as the coach and explain that? Or would you rather that at the start of the season, halfway in chunks, weekly, monthly?
Like, literally any information is good information when it comes to this. Obviously great if you're that organized, in the sense that you know what you're doing, where and when, and you know, kind of roughly know the outline of your week at the start of the season. Grand, you know, that information is great. There becomes a point, I think, where you as a player, especially if you're kind of under 15, under 17 in that Performance Centre kind of bracket, where you've got to make some kind of decisions when it comes to priorities of, like, actually, like, do I really want to get to the next level? Do I really want to get into Futures Cup? Or am I just happy kind of bobbling along, just enjoying my hockey? And so you've got to try and think about making some decisions there in terms of prioritising actually what you can put your efforts into.
Yeah,
so you can manage intensity, because otherwise, if you would try and maintain school, club, Performance Centre, county at the same time, junior teams at the weekend, do you know what I mean?
I think the key seems to be, and I guess the key message that you're trying to explain here is communication. And I guess I guess the problem you've got in any club, and I've spoken with many clubs over the last few years, and it's always about, communication tends to be the biggest and sole problem with everything. So I guess as long as parent A approaches coach A in the right manner, in the right way, at the appropriate time to talk this through, there's always solutions to problems. And I think that's that sounds like that's the key. If it's just a case of you rock up on a Sunday and, oh, little Jimmy was tired yesterday, so shouldn't be playing. I guess there's a question to be had, like, is that the most appropriate time to pass that message?
I think it doesn't just go down to the parents though and the players. I think if you're a coach that's really wanting the best for your players, which I'm sure that every single coach out there wants, is for their players to be successful, happy, enjoying their hockey or whatever sport it's in, then in order for you to facilitate in the best way possible, you can be forthcoming with that information. Go and greet players and parents at the start of your sessions and be like, oh, what's going on this week? Or, this kind of stuff. And just try and open that dialogue. I think parents and families are so busy with everything that's going on. If you as a coach really need that information and you're noticing things like people are picking up injuries, picking up colds and illnesses, playing like not to the level of maybe that they have previously have done, it's up to us to support that player and go and ask those questions and go and find out what's going on.
So practical tip number one from SJB coaching to coaches is at the start or before any session, go and talk to the parents.
Go and say hi. Just touch base with people. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So we've had a few questions coming in. Sorry, Pin, you want to just top up?
Yeah, just jumping on that, because I think there's a lot of kind of, I said that the information is out there, so I just want to kind of give people a heads up of maybe some of the numbers in terms of like if you're into that, and that could be a way of helping to communicate that information better, and just having your kids and stuff like that track and log the amount of hours that they're doing during the week. So a lot of kind of like the overuse injuries and stuff like that tend to come from the research anyway, from single sports. So if you're playing the same sport over and over and over again, your chance of getting injured in that junior level goes up. So variety of sports, so you're not moving through the same repetitive movement patterns. So for example, cricket, if you're a fast bowler, like go do something else as well, so to strengthen that shoulder, maybe go swim or something like that, and build up some other hours in some other sports. It's not going to have a detrimental effect on like the peak that they could reach in terms of performance in either sport. And just general like guidelines, like no one should be doing any more than 16 hours a week on a single sport. If you're doing 16 hours a week in a single sport, then your chance of overuse or kind of like overtraining syndrome, I think, like quadruples.
So before we jump onto these questions that are flying in quick and fast, I just think it's it'd be really positive to approach this topic. And I think a lot of the concept of what you're kind of fighting there is the book that came out, or the report that came out of this 10,000 hours. So can we just individually both approach that really succinctly? What's your views and what and why are those your views?
So for people who don't know, like the 10,000 hours came out as kind of, you needed to log 10,000 hours in anything to become an expert at it. So then that got everyone in thinking that the earlier you get someone into a sport and then get them to log those hours, the quicker they will become an expert. And actually, from what we've seen, probably what's more healthier is to flip that on its head and give those players and give those athletes a wider base as possible, and then specialize later on. So rather than worrying about logging 10,000 hours of swimming or gymnastics or whatever, teaching from as early as possible just the basic movement patterns of being able to run, jump, throw, catch, change direction, whatever that looks like, and then slowly whittle it down into like what they're good at later on, regardless of those 10,000 hours. If you're going to start focusing on
time,
putting those hours in, it's just overuse, right? It's the same as, just kind of having a piece of wood, and there's only so many repetitions that you can do through that before it snaps. Like, and
if you're having what is your stance on that? Do you think you should listen to it? Do you think it's a load of rubbish? What's your views?
So my stance on that is the late specialize. So to build a foundation as big as you can in as many sports as you can for as long as you can, because it's going to give you that variety, and from what we've seen in some of our like top athletes and stuff like that, they're very good gymnasts and stuff like that as well, that kind of help with those movement patterns. And just like anecdotally from us, when I was at Surrey Cricket, half of their strength and conditioning session we did gymnastics with them, because they'd spent so much time bowling and batting that actually they forgot where their arms and legs were. And then especially during the teenage years, when you start to grow, you need to kind of reprogram and retell that body where their arms and legs were. So we gave them half hour of doing tumbles, taking them upside down and stuff like that. And lo and behold, like their fielding got better because they understood where they were in relation to the ground and stuff like that. It had nothing to do necessarily with cricket, but we just kind of widened their toolbox. And
so your advice to parents then of a junior who's playing a shed load of hockey and maybe even starting to show a little bit of that kind of vibe, is to encourage them to not step away and stop, but just bring the hours down a little bit and maybe try other stuff and regain your mojo for it, or your enjoyment for it. Because actually, the sheer, I mean, some of the stuff I didn't know there were so many bloody acronyms things that kids do in hockey. I had no idea. That just makes me tired reading the thing. So I think I think that fatigue and actually that lack of interest could creep in. It's really dangerous. And then I wonder in 20, 30 years times, when they're looking back and doing research on how we managed juniors / Colts, whatever you want to call them, through this process, whether there's a better way. But your advice as a professional strength and conditioning coach is to encourage multi-sport and enjoyment and focus on quality, not quantity.
Yeah, absolutely. Variety, and if they enjoy it, let them do it.
Cool.
Because
yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree there. I've been in a few different environments now where kind of early specialization has been arguably encouraged in some spaces, and me personally, I think that the stuff that I've seen with youngsters developing, as you say, overuse injuries, and like tendinopathy and Osgood-Schlatters and all of these other names that are out there for basically soft tissue injuries, because they're just playing like a ton of netball or a ton of football or a ton of hockey and not really much else. And also they're playing those sports at kind of the intensity level all the time. There's no kind of peak and flow with recovery sessions and higher loading sessions and stuff like that, because it's just like you play at school, that's one session where that coach wants to see the best from you. You go to your club, that's another session where the coach wants to see the best from you. You go then to your county session, another session where they want to see the best out of you. There's where is the room for recovery in there? Whereas you then throw in other sports, swimming, that's no loading, that's another thing where it's off feet. You then got tennis or cricket, lower intensity there in terms of a cardiovascular sense or impact sense. So
we've had a question come in from Steve Eulenkamp. It's a fairly long-winded question. Many of the young people that play are being pulled from lots of different directions: school, age group, club training, 2-3 times a week, etc. With these different settings, some of the people within the club are suggesting that they should have rules to prevent the juniors playing too much. What are your thoughts on this? So if we can have a really reasonably brief response, what do we think?
I think a great place for us to get to would to be for each athlete to have a logbook, and you turn up to a training session or whatever, and at the end or the beginning of the training session, the coach signs off in your logbook, you completed X amount of hours in this sport. And I it's kind of a really new idea to me that I've just thought up of, but like, I don't know how practical that would be for people, but having people walking around with a logbook and you have a set amount of hours that you do in that sport. And then, you know, then like that coach then can monitor that and be like, well, I need you to play a game this weekend, which is, you know, 70 minutes long or whatever. So I need you to rest during this session. And that might be you give them some stretching or something like that to do, or they, you know, help out coaching, or, you know, something like that might be a good place for us to get to in terms of managing load.
Yeah. No, so you've had acknowledgement and agreement from Jill Hall, who's a physio. So you're obviously on the right lines with what you're saying. I don't know anything. I'm just doing I'll just chip it in. A point from Charlie Crosby. Shout out to the Crosbys, legends. To cut down the number of hours is hard when they have to play PC to be on the player pathway for Futures Cup, train for club at senior level, club and junior level, school fixtures for the schools. Also, doing this across 3 different sports is hard. I know they're a big cricket family as well. I think Millie's a cricket girl. Definitely need to look at reducing the hours and training, or make them more effective so it's not as impactful. They've suffered with shin splints and Osgood and all that kind of stuff. Where's Matt gone? There he is. Yeah. So I guess what I think that's more of a point than a question is that I had no idea. Kids at school did this volume. Like, that is
yeah, I mean, massively so. I mean, if you take a generic child at our school, at the school that I'm at, they will have a 2-hour games afternoon where they will be playing a selected sport, i.e. netball, football, hockey. Then they will have an hour's PE lesson as well in the week. So that's 3 hours there before they've even done anything external. So they've then got clubs that they can go to, which are an hour and a half pretty much every night of the week. So they could do one of that every week if they wanted to. My school, I'm fortunate to be at a private school, so we've got a strength and conditioning coach and a sports science intern team there that kind of facilitate the fundamental movement patterns, shall we say, of our players and our pupils at the school. But so arguably, before a child has actually left the school, in a normal week, they could be doing at least 5 hours of one particular sport before they've done anything else. Before they've, gone to join a club outside of school, or gone to a performance centre or anything like that. So it's a phenomenal amount there. If you then tie in performance centre on a Monday night, 2 hours there.
So I guess
twice a week.
And I'm very aware, having got kids myself, very aware that every child is different. Every child in the world is different. They react in certain ways. Some react really well to things, some don't. So what would be your advice? Well, first off, what signs should a parent be looking out for, and a coach and teachers, I presume, as well? What signs are there, Pin, from an S&C or a physical perspective that a kid is actually struggling with the sheer volume? And it's actually, maybe it isn't a lack of interest, maybe it's fatigue, maybe they're just absolutely, nearly said a rude word, but tired.
Yeah. So well, one of the markers is, in fact, lack of interest. Like, really? if you're seeing someone who doesn't want to go to trainers and stuff like that, but like 2 months ago they were super excited to play that sport, and then 2 months down the line they're like, I'm not really into it. Like, that's a good indicator of that they're overtraining. Fatigue, legs and body just feeling heavy and sore, regardless of what people think. Like, feeling sore isn't the marker of a good workout, it's a marker of poor recovery, or doing something novel. So you should only really feel sore if you've done something new for the first time. Body needs to get used to it, you've used it in a little different way, and you're inefficient at recovering from that. So if you've got kids and stuff like that, like I'm super sore like all of the time, that's a great indicator that they're under recovered.
So it's fatigue, lack of interest. So being tired, feeling uncomfortable. It's lack of interest.
Yeah.
Are there any
and then
other?
you've got, there's a ton. So you've got like irritability, which I guess is difficult to tell if they're a teenager, because they might just be irritable and snappy anyway, because it's that age. Weight loss, like anxiety, and all of those sorts of kind of negative things, like if they're having trouble sleeping, if like they're having like sleep disturbances and stuff like that, that could all be pointing towards that they need to do less. And
I think another thing to think about with that as well is if they're picking up colds and illnesses and things like that, it means that their immune system is not working as efficiently as it needs to. And you know that's a massive thing, especially in a school environment. If they start picking those things up, it generally tends to be towards the end of a term as well, and where they're just generally just all round tired.
Just briefly moving on, so I'm not cutting you guys off, just there's loads of questions fired in from Tim Beaton. Be good to understand how some of the elite athletes went through the process, what other sports they maintained along the way. Really hear any of these athletes get out there and talking to young aspiring athletes on how they navigated through this process. Their knowledge is key. So I'm very aware that a lot of the ladies team, some of them are really keen or big cricket players, weren't they? Is that right?
Yeah. There's a few of them that have played cricket to a decent standard. Sam Ward, obviously now playing in the G. He's a good cricketer as well. And actually, I think it was just up until he got selected for GB, was still playing to a good standard on a Sunday.
There's a bit of a correlation there, though, isn't there? There's a bit of a correlation between so hockey is like a wintry sport, cricket's a summer sport. So I mean, like for me, when I was at school, I was massively into my rugby, played load of club stuff, got into hockey, and one day I had to make a decision whether I was going to keep hockey going or keep rugby going. Luckily, I joined the army, so I didn't have to do either. But you know, the way forward is actually identifying what fits into your arena, I guess. And cricket and hockey makes sense. You've got winter, summer, tennis.
I mean, there's a few that are, competed for clubs and things like that. Athletics as well. Athletics goes hand in hand. Obviously another summer sport. I mean, I do really resonate with the question here and the point that he's made, in the sense of like these elite athletes that we hear about, we only really hear about the sport that they are good at now and that they're elite in right now, where actually it'd be more handy for the youngsters that are aspiring to be like that to hear about what their life was like as a teenager.
Yeah. And maybe, if you're at, well, obviously it's quite dependent on what the club's at, but if you've got a player that's played at a certain level or whatever, maybe the clubs or even the schools who have had people who played at a good level can tap into that and invite them back or ask them to come down and just have a chat with the students or the juniors or whatever we want to call them.
I think a massive pressure, the reason why kids do so much is because they feel like they need to do so much in order to become elite and amazing and the best that they can be.
And it's interesting across the whole level, because we're certainly talking with a lot of clubs, their want, which is a positive, to provide value for subs and fees and all this kind of stuff, is reflected in quantity of hockey. I wonder if the clubs maybe looked at that slightly different and went down an angle of, we can provide value for your investment to be a part of this club in other angles, like knowledge on strength and conditioning, like Q&A sessions with the players that the Colts.
Quality rather than quantity.
That maybe it's a view spin that the clubs could have. We've had a comment in from Grant Stewart Ward, agreeing with all of our points. As a head of hockey, It does come down to the fact that clubs and schools don't seem to speak to each other. Development of junior skills, also workload. Clubs want juniors to be playing adult hockey. Schools want to fulfill their tough fixture blocks, and then they're wanting the students to progress to the player pathway, etc. A lot of schools don't seem to have S&C, and he feels like that's a big trick missing. But also he's feeling like it's a communication problem, or there are improvements that could be made. But I think the big thing, certainly reading that before you two jump in, when it comes to the communication aspect, that's the only part I can probably give input on. It's a case of you have to have 3 or 4 those different elements keen to improve that area before it's going to work. So you could have a teacher that's really interested in wanting to communicate better with the county setup, but you have to have someone like that teacher in the county setup wanting to work back the other way as well. So you have to have a positive and a negative that work together.
Yeah, 100%, and that's challenging. It's time consuming as well to try and build those relationships, but at the end of the day, it's worth it, because it just means that you'll be able to look after this individual so much more, and so much better as well. I mean, I completely resonate with what he's saying there in terms of the head of hockey space, that, yes, you want to fulfill your fixture blocks on a Saturday. And it was kind of a tough pill that I had to swallow in the role that I'm in at the moment, in actually saying, do you know what, the kids that I'm coaching at the moment that are, 15, 16 years old, they're going to get more quality and more out of playing their adult hockey game on a Saturday than what they are in our kids game, in our Saturday school hockey game here. So it was a case of me having to rejig what our week looked like for that kid, and for those in those age groups in particular, to try and make sure that they were able to experience what was most beneficial for them. What are they going to get more out of playing 70 minutes of average under 14, under 15 hockey on a Saturday, or getting, I don't know, 25 minutes, a half for the second team, third team, or whatever on a Saturday, with a bit of a higher standard. So that was a pill that I had to swallow quite quickly, and I only was able to do that through having the conversations with our players and with our parents, to try and get that balance there.
Bex Ward has just posted up that Adam Jamili played football and did sprinting, Mario Itoji basketball and rugby. Just as a point.
So I think for me on the second end of that question, I think a lot of it, from my experience, is that misconception of what strength and conditioning is. I think a lot of parents and stuff like that I've come into contact with are almost scared to let their kids do strength and conditioning, because they have this picture in their head of that we're going to get them to, lift massive weights and all of that sort of stuff, and it's going to stunt their growth and they're going to get injured in the weights area. And it's actually not the case at all. There's no research to support that lifting weights and doing strength and conditioning with good technique stunts growth or increases risk of injury. It actually does the complete opposite. And I think that was kind of like a misconception for at least for the last 10 years.
That's definitely the stance that my parents had with me when I was younger, when I was asking if I could, do some weights or whatever. In fact, my granddad, it was my granddad that used to turn around to me and say, "You'll be really short." I'm sure anyway I didn't do it, so clearly it's a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
What else we got here? There is a question, surrounding recovery. What should be the minimum number of hours of recovery that a young athlete should do?
So it's going to be dependent on how many hours of work they're doing. But say for instance, like Steph said, they're playing one sport, they're doing 5 hours of that sport a week. I'd probably say that they at least want to be doing 2 hours of kind of something that's guided towards recovery, specific in kind of like a movement aspect. So that could be accumulating 30 to 40 minutes throughout the week of foam rolling, and then the same of stretching. It doesn't need to be all in one go. Like, you can add those little habits in. You know, they're be the first one to get to the pitch. They break out their foam roller. They do 5 minutes of foam rolling every day before they do a session. It could be, you know, they on a Sunday, rather than do nothing at all, they take, you know, a 45-minute gentle walk by themselves to help increase blood flow, but also kind of allow them to psychologically recover and have a break and some time to themselves and stuff. So I don't know of any like hard and fast numbers, but just off the top of my head, like I'd say you want to be doing probably about 50% of what you're doing work wise, but that obviously doesn't need to be all in one go. And
I mean, as you've learned with Nikki through her international experience, that you can do recovery. You know, I think I've seen pictures on Instagram of Nick doing some work and sat there with those ice trouser things on. Or was that you? I don't remember.
That was me at work. We working.
So you know, there's tricks of the trade, and there's ways to navigate around everything. And I guess coming back to Steph as a teacher, I'm very aware it's 21 minutes past. We've got 9 minutes, and I do want to touch on mental health for the kids as well. So just if we can keep this brief. From a perspective of recovery, Steph as a teacher, if you had a junior, if you want to call them Colts, a junior that plays a large number of hockey, how would you feel about a pupil coming up to you and saying, "Miss, I've done X amount of hours hockey this week. Can I?" And then if they've got a recovery,
I think I'd probably faint.
How would you? But if they did,
I think I'd be like, "Oh my god!"
But that would be told us. How would you? Would you be okay with that?
I would be so happy and so impressed to accommodate that, because number one, it's shown that they're taking control over their journey as an athlete, and number two, like if a person is sore, if a person is tired, if the person is feeling fatigued, I have a duty of care to look after that person. You know, how I wouldn't be able to go to sleep at night if I put them into a session and they then got injured and was then out for 6 weeks.
I guess that's quite for you. I guess it would be, hopefully, all teachers listening to this or around.
I think if you had an individual come up to you and say that, I think that as a teacher, you'd be really, really impressed and really happy with that, and try and do what you can to facilitate that. Obviously, if that's something that's happening on a regular basis and they're skipping out of your lesson or whatever all the time, then that's something.
Sleep in class.
Yeah. That definitely doesn't happen to any of my pupils. Definitely doesn't. But anyway,
I feel you boring them. That's
yeah. But you know, if that's happening on a regular basis, and that's where you can have the conversation with both the young individual and with parents or whoever's at home to try and address what's going on there, because it might be a larger issue, but that's, you know, separate thing. But if it's, you know, a one-off thing where maybe they've had a Saturday game, Sunday PC session, and they rent a Monday afternoon games afternoon, and they're like, "Miss, do you know what? I'm just knackered. Like, do you mind if I just do a little bit less today?" I'd be like, "Go on." Because
is that element of teaching. If I'll be straight, if I'd have done that when I was at school, gone up to my teacher, I'd tell you where I'd have been told where to stand in the corner with a nose. Is teaching now? I mean, you're in it currently. Are they more receptive to that? So
I think so, because I think our understanding of the physiological demands of sport is greater now, and you know, as a PE teacher, you know, we all go through our formal teaching qualifications with, you know, qualified to teach academic PE, a lot of us as well, so we have an understanding of the physiology that's going on when an individual is taking part within sport, and we know that the damage that can happen and the risk of injuries and things like that. So I think maybe it is a little bit different now.
I guess yet again, as per the majority of things, not only in sport or coaching but in life, it comes down to communication. If it's communicated as best as possible at the right time in the right way, then everyone would work together. But as normal, when things aren't communicated, or, you know, I guess the effort into that, because actually thinking about it, a parent could work alongside their child to create their recovery strategy in all of their environments, wherever they are.
Yeah, I mean,
if that's communicated with the school, surely the school would support that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such, something that's just kind of come up into my head now. It's like thinking about my an under 13s age group that we have our Monday afternoon games session. They've got Saturday fixtures. They all go and play on a Sunday at a club. What's to say that our Monday afternoon game session couldn't be like walkthroughs and then a bit of S&C, stretching, foam rolling and whatever. And then later on in the week, when they have our training night, that's when we do our higher intensity stuff. There's...
So actually, if we're surmising the last 55 minutes, then a lot of it, I think it's a really good message, actually. I think it's a really powerful message, is actually that if all the different acronyms of PCs, MAGs, DICE, all these things are actually communicating with each other, they could collectively create a strategy that where they're all still having the face-to-face time with these players, but maybe it's not all hockey. It could be walking, it could be whiteboard lessons, it could be S&C, stretching, talk throughs. But the problem is, because they're all so bloody independent of everything, even club to school,
we're expecting the intensity to be so much higher.
Everything.
So that's arguably where something such as like periodization, and I'm sure that Matt could expand a little bit more into that.
Not on this one, because we've got
but that's where periodization would come in. I think the challenge that at the moment is because we don't have that facilitated at the moment. That's not a thing. So it's got to be down to that individual and the families or whoever's at home to kind of put those two things together, identify where the important times of the year are, important games, important training sessions, futures cup selection, whatever it might be, and then adjust your priorities in that week or the subsequent time around that, and just keep the coaches and teachers in the loop with that.
So Steph, give me 3 of your key points for the topic of tonight's session surrounding how parents can support the volume of hockey their kids are playing. What are your 3 biggest points? And then pin, same question.
My 3 biggest points then would be to be as organized as possible, with timetabling, who's where, who's doing what. Get all of as much contact detail as you can for the coaches and the teachers that they're working with, so email addresses and whatever else, and then talk to those people and use it and have an open dialogue there. And they will be able to help you manage the workload of the individual, so that you can prioritize when and where you need to be when playing and training at various different intensities at different points in the year. That's what I would say.
Pin, same question.
I'd say building recovery. So recovery is just not a nice to have, like it's a necessity. So make sure you're making room for that. Same as Steph, like communication, both like across all the lines, but mainly probably from parent to child, understand their demands and everything like that of their sport, and get to know them when like if they're tired or whatever, so you can spot kind of overtraining as early as possible. And then don't be afraid of strength and conditioning. Like the stronger you are, like, and that kind of encompasses everything, the better everything will be. Like the stronger you are, core, legs and stuff like that, like it's never going to have a downside. So again, it's kind of the same as recovery. Like it's a necessity, not just a nice to have.
I think the only additional part to that, from listening to both of you two waffle on for the last hour, is really surrounding education. Like there's so much you like, if someone said to me, should someone who's 13, 14 be throwing weights around, purely through what I was taught, I'd be like, oh no, apparently they'll injure themselves, their body's not formed yet, or blah, 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 all that kind of nonsense. Actually, there's so much status quo information that isn't actually accurate, and I've actually learned something tonight, so nicely done. I think that's actually really, really valuable, and actually
I think those things is, you have to try and understand where that information is coming from. It coming from?
I would argue that the governing bodies and counties and clubs and this kind of stuff is it not a little bit irresponsible that they don't have this information?
Well, this is something that I feel, quite passionately about, in the sense of, we as coaches and teachers are in a really privileged position to facilitate this strength and conditioning, and to help individuals learn how to manage their workloads, in terms of like the physical demands of sport. Yet we don't necessarily have the formal qualifications or teaching and understanding of how to go about doing that. And I think that's where, I'm sure that you'll agree with me, Pinette, that there's rogue PTs out there, and people calling themselves strength and conditioning coaches, and they're actually not. And coaches tapping up, reading bits online, and then implementing into their sessions without anything that's really evidence-based and really well informed. So I think coaches are just not entering that arena because they don't feel confident in that. I think that's the challenge that is out there, really.
And it's easier not to do, right? It's easier to not to do it than take a risk on something that
exactly.
might work or add extra injury risk. So it's just easier to be like, well, we just won't do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think about warm-ups, everyone just does the standard jog around the pitch twice,
Not
few dynamics, in we go. And how much evidence is that? Is that evidence-based now? Is that actually the best way to prepare our players?
Yeah, it was like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the problem that we've got is that so I had this chat with someone the other day, and he was saying that at the elite level, there's all this information, and I actually turned around and said, well, at what point and how to even from something basic like a warm-up, how does the most appropriate way for 2020, not during COVID-19 when we're out, how does that filter down to grassroots, like I don't know, Truro Hockey Club? It should be a really good place to be, is that Truro Hockey Club, the coach for the under 9s is teaching, because he's been taught how to run a good warm up for Colts or juniors in this day and age. Not a case of like when we were playing junior sport pin, and it was a case of, there's a tree, off you go, run around it, come back, there you go, warm up.
I mean, I think it's a massive thing in terms of preparation for players as well. Like at an elite level, they obviously want their players to be prepped and primed in as many different ways, from a strength and conditioning, a tech and tack way, from recovery, nutrition, to be at their peak of performance. So arguably it's in their best interest to facilitate that by getting in good practice of warm-ups, cool downs, recovery, strength and conditioning, nutrition, all of that stuff at a young age, because then it becomes habit and ingrained, and really, really good movement patterns and things like that, so that they don't have then the issues that you have as a 17, 18-year-old and plus, that arguably sometimes are riddled with injuries already because they've not been prepped in that way.
Yeah, cool. Right, guys, we've gone over by 3 minutes, so sadly we're not going to be able to touch on the mental health side for supporting kids, but there's been loads of really great engagement in this, so maybe it's something that we can touch on another time.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, sorry I couldn't get back to everyone's questions and answers, but Steph, over to you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for engaging tonight. Obviously, it's quite an emotive subject for a lot of people. So if you do have any questions or any issues in particular that you'd like a little bit of help or advice with, then I'm sure that we can try and help out where we can. So if you want to get in touch with us, either through the Hockey for Heroes page or on my SJB coaching pages on Instagram or on Twitter, and we'll be happy to help. And we'll see you back here next Monday. So thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. Bye.